Okay, moving on to the next segment of today's show, I wanted to talk a little bit about the New Orleans Saints. And the Saints have actually been in the news a little bit over the last couple of days because it's been announced that Drew Brees, their starting quarterback for the second year in a row, is injured and is going to miss a couple games. And in 2019, Drew Brees suffered a right thumb injury against the Los Angeles Rams and missed 5 games. And Teddy Bridgewater came in and led the Saints to a 5-0 record. Brees ultimately returned. He guided the Saints to their third straight NFC South title, but the team fell short in the playoffs against the Minnesota Vikings in the wildcard round. And in 2020, Drew Brees has showed signs that he may hang up the cleats and call it a career, but he signed a 2-year contract to try to capture another Super Bowl ring and cement his legacy as one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. And in Week 10, against the 49ers, the Saints got some revenge against a team that they barely beat in 2019. They beat them 48-46 and improved to 7-2 on the season. However, Drew Brees took a tough helmet-to-helmet shot from the 49ers defensive end, Kentavious Street, and appeared to have taken a huge blow to his midsection. And the officials called roughing the passer, but at the same time, Drew Brees continued to play through the first half, but when the second half began, Drew Brees taped himself up and he was out of the game. And Jameis Winston took the majority of the snaps under center, and we all know the Saints ended up winning the game 27-13. And with the news that Drew Brees has both a right collapsed lung and multiple rib fractures, Jameis Winston is more than likely going to be the starting quarterback of this New Orleans Saints team. By the way, I think we could all agree Taysom Hill has one of the best jobs in football. He literally just does a couple snaps and just makes a boatload of money, and it's hilarious that people are actually considering him to be the New Orleans Saints starting quarterback, because I understand Jameis Winston was a guy that threw 30 interceptions last year, but I don't think we've seen anything from Taysom Hill as a passer for us to think that he has a legitimate role as a starting quarterback in this league. And Winston is going to take over, and we all know him because he was the starting quarterback in this same division for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And one of the first things that come to mind when talking about Jameis Winston are just overall his numbers last year. 5,109 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 30 picks. And this is a guy who is the former number 1 overall pick in that 2015 NFL draft. He won the Heisman Trophy and a national championship during his career. So this guy has a lot of talent, and we know that there are signs that he could play the quarterback position. But Winston is going to have to really discipline himself to limit the mistakes, and one way he could do that is to play like Drew Brees has throughout his career, and kind of similar to what Teddy Bridgewater has done in his first 5 starts last year as a New Orleans Saints. And that is to make the best of the weapons around him and to take advantage of the fact that the New Orleans Saints do have a pretty talented defense. And Michael Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray. I think Jameis Winston could play well down the stretch for the New Orleans Saints in the next couple of games. And really, the New Orleans Saints' goal right now should be to win the NFC South. We could worry about the Super Bowl later once, hopefully, Drew Brees comes back towards the back end of the season. But what I'm saying here is this. The New Orleans Saints, right now, their goal should be to win the division. And most of the time, a lot of people will ask me, Zach, how exactly do you determine if a backup quarterback is good or not? Typically, what are your expectations that you're going to want to have from a backup quarterback? That is actually a question that I get asked a decent amount of times. And usually, the answer I have is, let's just say, theoretically, Drew Brees is going to be out 4 games. In order for the New Orleans Saints to win this NFC South, all they're really going to have to do is go 2-2 down the stretch and beat the Atlanta Falcons. And to be honest, I do think Jameis Winston is a quarterback that could do that, especially when you give all the talent around him. I got to be honest with you guys. I think that Bruce Arians and Jameis Winston, there was a reason why that marriage didn't really work out. And let me explain. We all know what kind of a football coach Bruce Arians is. He's the guy who his background is no risk it, no biscuit. And he always encouraged his quarterback, Jameis Winston, to throw the ball downfield. My thing is, I don't think that kind of coach was good for a quarterback like Jameis Winston, who was really trying to clean up the mistakes and really be a little bit more efficient. I think playing Jameis Winston in an offense like Bruce Arians just didn't work for this reason. It's almost like when you're born, right? If you're born a crazy kid and you're adventurous and you like to do many different things and you're mischievous and you're a devil, I feel like those kind of qualities don't really go away until you're a mature adult that realizes everything around you. And I feel like Bruce Arians was kind of the coach that really encouraged Jameis Winston to not make those kind of mistakes, but he put Jameis Winston in a much more likely position to make those mistakes than I think he needed. And I feel like with Sean Payton, this is a guy who is an offensive specialist. We all know what he's been able to do over the last couple of years with Drew Brees as his quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. And I do think that Sean Payton coaching a guy like Jameis Winston could very well be one of the better things that has happened to Jameis Winston during his career. This is now a massive opportunity for Jameis Winston. It appears that he's going to replace Drew Brees, and to be honest, once again, we're not really sure how long it's going to take Drew Brees to recover from these rib fractures. And if Jameis Winston can somehow, some way manage to keep the New Orleans Saints, who right now are sitting at the top of the NFC with a 7-2 record, if Jameis could just manage to keep them afloat as a legitimate Super Bowl contender, then maybe he could be able to revive his own career like Teddy Bridgewater did a year ago. And ultimately, we know what Teddy Bridgewater did based off that contract. He is now the starting quarterback of the Carolina Panthers. And I feel like right now, if you were to ask me, Zach, straight up, who is the more talented football player? Which football player has the most pure talent? Is it Jameis Winston or is it Teddy Bridgewater? For me, as much as this may surprise you, the name that comes to mind right away is Jameis Winston. I think from a pure football talent perspective, I think Jameis Winston is a more talented quarterback than Teddy Bridgewater. Just Teddy Bridgewater really did a good job last year of managing the game efficiently and leading his New Orleans Saints to a 5-0 record. Last year, under the watch of Bruce Arians, I just don't think that was going to be something Jameis Winston could ever do. So this is part of the reason why Jameis Winston chose the Saints in free agency, I believe. He settled for a 1-year contract that was only worth $1.1 million plus incentives. He specifically wanted to improve his career by putting himself in one of the most NFL quarterback-friendly situations in the league, whether he got the chance to play or not. He said he was eager to receive a Harvard education in quarterback school under Drew Brees and Coach Sean Payton. And to be honest, before this injury, I kind of thought, okay, there's a good chance Drew Brees retires after this season. Odds are it's not like the New Orleans Saints are going to draft a quarterback and all of a sudden put him front and center as the guy to be the future quarterback of the team. So I think Jameis Winston for the next year or two, if Drew Brees does indeed end up retiring after this season, I think Jameis in New Orleans under Sean Payton could work. And Sean Payton declined to name a starter in the event that Drew Brees does miss time, since he said that wouldn't benefit the team strategically. But Winston, I think we could all agree, is most likely going to be the choice after he did end up replacing Drew Brees in the second half of Sunday's 27-13 victory over the San Francisco 49ers. And this could also serve as a audition for Winston and the Saints, I think. Because once again, I think if Jameis Winston plays well during this stretch, which I think he can given all of the weapons this New Orleans Saints team has, then ultimately the New Orleans Saints are going to say, okay, here's a guy who's still 27, still has plenty of years of good football left. He also knows the system because he's been in the year after working with Sean Payton. I think that if this does work out, this could be one of the better things that has happened to Jameis Winston during his NFL career, just because I don't think the skill set of him as a quarterback really morphed with the skill set and attitude of Bruce Arians as a head football coach. And I totally understand. There were a lot of people that after last year, the 30 touchdowns and the 30 picks, that were just saying, all right, we're done with Jameis. We don't really understand what the point is. But at the same time, I do think that ultimately this could work. And in the 5 games Drew Brees missed last season, Teddy Bridgewater took 304 snaps at quarterback. Taysom Hill took 13. And I feel like what that says to me is Sean Payton can say all he wants about, oh, we're not exactly sure who the quarterback of the future, or excuse me, of the rest for the rest of the season is going to be. We're not exactly sure who the starting quarterback during our game this week is. But at the same time, I'm pretty confident Jameis could get the job done. He's pretty experienced playing against NFC South squads. And I think, once again, the key is just don't force the ball, don't make mistakes, and put your team in a position to win. Both Jameis and Taysom Hill have a good feel for what we're trying to do. Sean Payton said Monday they pick things up, and I feel like it's a good room. Jameis Winston did also show a little bit of rust on Sunday. He missed 2 throws and took 2 sacks in the red zone, and he nearly threw an interception over the middle of the field that would have been heavily scrutinized if Jimmy Ward, the 49ers safety, held onto the ball. And Jameis didn't turn the ball over, and he did lead the Saints to both a field goal and a touchdown while going 6 of 10 with 63 yards. And I kind of feel like that's the blueprint that Teddy Bridgewater ultimately used in order for the New Orleans Saints to win. Jameis said, I was excited that I had the opportunity, and I just knew that my main job was to go in there and do what Drew Brees would do, just protect the football and try to lead us down the field and score. That's what he said after the game, and I think Jameis is in a position to succeed here. I really do. The Saints are optimistic he could do the same thing as Bridgewater for a couple of reasons. He's surrounded by one of the best weapons in the NFL with Peyton and Kamara and Michael Thomas. The Saints' defense and special teams are also 2 very good units that could win games on their own sometimes when needed, and they were awesome over the last 2 weeks, including the 38-3 victory over Tampa Bay. And once again, Jameis Winston is no slouch. I understand he's the first quarterback in the history of the NFL to throw 30 and 30 in the same season, but I do believe he won the Heisman for a reason. I do believe he was the number 1 pick in his draft for a reason, and I do think ultimately he could put the Saints in a really good position to win.